You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Chris in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, TV shows, games, books, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 660, and this is the first, official episode that we've got in a series of episodes focused on the Mandalorian and Grogu. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Mandalorian and Grogu. This is a spotlight show for us. And with me, as always, is Chris. Chris, how you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm doing great. And I can't wait to dive into these two characters that, in my opinion, did some substantial growth in the movie.
Yeah. And I know that was a kind of a key target for you when we were talking about, expectations and what you were looking forward to. And so we're going to get into all that here in just a second. Before we do, how about some shout outs and thank yous to some very special people?
Sure. So first of all, we want to invite you to join our Patreon group. If you can help the show out, you can join for as little as $2 a month. You can join without paying anything as well, just to show that support. But yeah, join our Patreon if you can. We'll recognize our now part of the tribe members: Krista Martinelli, Will I Am, Michael Paisley. I've got a Brad Feeling, Rita Reborn, Jacob H, Josh C, Uncle Leon, Sharkman Dan, Alejandro, Jackson Abbott, Daz Davies, Risk Bayless, Danny P, Mike Borda, Dante, aka Utini, and Kat, aka Vader's Girl. Now we'll move to our Delusions of Grandeur tier. Now this is Rod Racing. That's my guy. Rob Grumstead, Steve Kalink, and Vanessa Sorensen, who's another great friend of mine. Thank you so much for your support of the Cantina Cast.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining. And like Chris said, we've got a ton of stuff in the backlog. We've got a number of Patreon shows. In fact, we're going to talk about that here in just a second. I'll segue over to you, Chris, but we've got two shows that are coming up that'll be Patreon exclusives, and we've got a whole bunch more, especially coming up on the 50th anniversary of Star Wars and Starfighter and Celebration. And there's just going to be a lot of content. So we do two shows per week. One's Patreon, one's public. And this is a public show. But as far as what we got coming up, what do we got coming up, Chris?
So this coming Sunday night will be a Patreon show. It's going to be, from a certain point of view, top 3 moments from Maul Shadow Lord. And we're inviting Patreon members to come out and be on the show. Either, they can be on like us with full video and audio, or if they choose to just be on audio, that's fine as well. But we're inviting our top tier Patreon members to come on the show and give us their top 3 moments of Maul Shadow Lord, along with some honorable mentions. And that's going to be this Sunday night, May 31st. Then moving on to the following week, June 2nd, will be another Patreon show. We're going to review the 3rd issue in the Shadow of Maul comic series, which is a prequel to Maul Shadow Lord. And issue number 3 marks the halfway point of this series, and we're going to break down the comic in full. So Patreon members, look out for that episode Tuesday the 2nd, June 2nd. Then on Sunday, June 7th, we'll be back on as a public show, and we're going to talk about Grogu's abilities with the Force. Grogu and the Force. We're going to take a look at the abilities that we've seen him show over, the first 3 seasons of The Mandalorian, along with what we saw in The Mandalorian and Grogu, and kind of talk about his progression in his Force powers. So look for that show on Sunday, June 7th. And it will be a public show. So we're going to have a lot of stuff coming, so please tune in.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. And hopefully you guys can join us for some of those shows, at least the public show, if not the Patreon show, if you feel so inclined. Okay. Let's see. I think that's about all we have. Don't forget, if you were with us on the live chat, feel free to throw some questions in there if you want. It's too late. We've already picked a winner. But if you want to throw questions in there, you can. Or if you just want to interact, we'll throw some stuff up when we can as time permits. And as a reminder, this will be now the 3rd poster that we're going to give away. So tonight we'll be giving away another poster, and I keep forgetting to grab it before the show starts. But we have the official posters from the Mandalorian and Grogu special event, the 30-minute preview that was showed probably now 3 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And every week on the public shows, we'll be giving away one poster. If you want to enter for one of these posters, if this is your first time joining us, or you feel like, hey, maybe I should finally do this, all you got to do is send us a question. You can send us a question however you'd like. You can DM on social media. You can send us an email at hello there@cantinacast.com. or you can put it in the YouTube comments or questions at the very end of the show or while we're on here, and I'll carry that over into next week. But that's all you got to do. We'll announce the winner at the very end once we go through all the questions tonight. And you have a chance to win it next weekend as well. So good luck to everybody, and hopefully you were picked tonight. So, all right, let's get into this. And before we get started, there was something that I know I've seen some folks talk about, but I want to. It's so important, and in a couple of different ways. We all know the Mandalorian and Grogu, and we all know that Mandalorian is voiced by Pedro Pascal. I think in the earlier seasons there were some times when he was in the costume. But as things got on and he suddenly burst in terms of popularity, his time became very, very limited. And so we started seeing, I wouldn't say necessarily much more, but he was just the voice of the Mandalorian Grogu. And when you think about that character, because this is a character spotlight, right, for both characters, when you think about that character, yes, it's the voice, but there is a level of physicality that comes with it. There is a presence that comes with him when he's on screen as the Mandalorian. And that is attributed to two primary stunt actors. I don't even, it's fair to call them stunt actors at this point, because I think they're all, for all intents and purposes, they're just actors as far as I'm concerned. But that's Brendan Wayne and Lateef Crowder. If you've never seen these guys, if you've never seen what they look like, go take a look at them. They're about the same height. I think Brandon may be just a little bit taller than Lateef, but
yeah, he's about a half inch taller.
But a half inch taller. But these are the guys that you see as primarily the Mandalorian. And what was cool about this movie was if you watch the opening title, the sequence, the credits, it says Pedro Pascal, and then the very next two people that they show are Brendan Wayne and Lateef Crowder. That is a very cool move. I'm not sure if that was, I know it was planned, right? I mean, they did it all, but the fact that they're acknowledging those guys and giving them the credits like that at the front and not towards the very end, or, at the very end of the credits or at the very end of the movie, and they're doing that right up in front, right? The billing for them is immediately after Pedro Pascal, says a lot about it. So kudos to them. I think it's well earned. It's, they've earned a lot of respect from everybody. And when you think of those characters, again, that's, Pedro Pascal's voice is inescapable, and he's certainly got the look. But there's so much of what we love about those characters that come from these two actors, and it's great that they got their flowers in the credits like that.
Absolutely. It's similar to, again, this was the first Star Wars movie where they actually had credits at the beginning of the movie. And it's similar to how David Prowse, actually, it was kind of reversed. David Prowse in the original Star Wars movies, the original trilogy movies, he got billing first, and then the voice of was given to James Earl Jones.
Exactly. Yeah,
so it's kind of inverted for the Mandalorian and Grogu, but do they deserve it? Absolutely. There was a question in the chat about was he in the suit in the movie, and that was from One Up versus CPU. When we saw Pedro Pascal without the helmet, yes, that was him. Any other time, it was either Brendan Wayne or Lateef Crowder. And so that's how you know who was in there. Now, Brendan Wayne was more of like the casual man in the suit, like doing the walking. He has a strut. And then all of the real physical, like stunt work, that was Lateef Crowder. Yeah, they both have their... and together, I mean, it all works, right? You got three people coming together and building this very unique character, and they all do a very good job at what they do. So I just want to call that out, at least on the Mando side of things, that they were acknowledged, and like Paisley said, that was a very classy move for them to do that. Absolutely, which is great. And you know what? What's even better is that in several of the social media shorts that have come on through the Lucasfilm and Star Wars social media accounts, there were a couple of vignettes where Pedro Pascal is actually giving them like props and saying, "Oh yeah, we wouldn't be here. This character wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you two." So it's he's essentially saying it's not all me, it's all three of us.
Right.
And I think that's even more classy, because he didn't have to say that, and he comes out and he says that, and I think that's very classy that he acknowledges those guys, because they are vital to the character of the Mandalorian.
Yeah. I mean, it's an artistic partnership that exists, and they all acknowledge it. Lucasfilm acknowledges it. So it's a good thing. Hopefully we'll see more of that, in the future from, from Star Wars, Lucasfilm, Disney, but, other franchises could probably take a note on that too, because this is not uncommon,
Right.
A lot of times we see, like the Batman movies or
Mhm.
I don't know. There's other examples where, you've got people like Lateef Crowder and Brendan Wayne that are doing tons of great work behind the masks or whatever. And they don't necessarily get all the credit, it usually goes to the voice actors or whoever. So,
Right.
so good deal there. As far as, I guess one more thing kind of behind the scenes, I thought maybe I know we talked a little bit about it when we did our kind of review show, but the puppeteer work that was done here, Phil Tippett, his company, his crew. I mean, I don't even know what else there is to say. Phil Tippett is a legend. He's a god in terms of, all of this. He's a pioneer. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we see here was, not necessarily, it wasn't created with him. It started, 20 years, 30 years before that. But where he took the art and how much he did with that art, in lieu of not having special effects right at the time when the Star Wars movies came out. There was a lot of great work that was done with the puppeteer work here, whether that was Grogu, which, they had moments. I love the way they showed him walking around, a little rapping on the tap and on the back of the helmet. It makes me laugh and giggle every single time I see it. It's just so perfectly done. There was the moments where, like, all the times when he was like swimming, that whole sequence where he's taking care of Din and trying to get him back to health. That was almost, I don't even know that there was any CG. That was almost exclusively puppeteer work. Another one that stood out that I remember is that I laughed at is when he goes up the pipe, they're going to go into the back, and he goes to the vent and comes down or whatever, opens the door for Grogu or for Mando to come in. Just seeing his little knees bend as he's kind of crawling up that, right? That's all puppet work. And it works so well. Like, and this movie does such a good job of that. I think we said this again, but it's worth repeating. So much of what we saw felt very like, Jim Henson type work, Dark Crystal, Labyrinth. The name, I was thinking even at times when we got into the swamp, do you remember, what was it? Was it Elmo Otter's Jug Band Christmas? Was that the name of it? Do you remember that from like HBO early 80s?
No, okay, I don't.
Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas. Okay, never mind. I mean, I'm dating myself. Someone probably knows and seen this, but there was just moments in there where a lot of this stuff took me back to my childhood and watching the puppeteer work and the craft that was going on here. So not to mention the stop motion animation stuff that we got with the two big droids. But yeah, all of it was great. Like I felt like they just did a really good job. But bringing the focus back and the spotlight back to Grogu, there was I don't know that there was much CG for him at all. I'm really curious to find out if there was.
Yeah, as far as I could tell, there wasn't any because or there wasn't much because everything looked organic. When there's CG, you kind of see some like fluid movement that you don't normally see out of a puppet. I didn't really see any of that. And actually the other night, just for the heck of it, I decided to, I'm sorry, there was a comment. It it distracted me for a little bit. I'll answer that question in a minute. But just because I felt like it, I saw the finale, the 8th episode of season 2 of The Mandalorian. And there Grogu was not mostly CGI, but he had some obvious CG areas.
Yeah.
And the one that I noticed the most is when, he takes that walk toward R2-D2. That was all CG. And I was like, I think I kind of prefer how I saw him in The Mandalorian and Grogu. Yeah. Because he had those wide steps where he was just taking like his whole body was turning as he was walking.
Oh, yeah.
And that was CG. Whereas the little scurrying that he did in the movie, which was, animatronic, still a puppet, but animatronic. I kind of dug that better.
I think so too. I think you're right. I need to go back and watch what you saw, but yeah, I would agree. I like that little shuffle that he has better.
Yeah, exactly. Alex put in the chat talking about shows from the 80s that had puppets. Yeah, we all remember Fraggle Rock.
Yeah.
But I do remember today's special with the mouse and the old man.
Muffy was the mouse. And Sam was the...
and what was the name of the mannequin that you had to put the hat on and say magic words? Jeff. His name was Jeff. I think it was Jeff. I don't
I think
know.
you're right too.
But
Something
yeah,
alakado.
I don't
I'm trying to think
remember.
of
Hocus Pocus Alamogocus.
that's there you go.
Oh my
Jeez.
gosh, we're old, man. Jeez. But yes, I remember that show. Today's Special. I do.
Okay. Yeah. You had to sneak that in there. Yeah, those are shows that we used to watch as kids, and he has fond memories. Pinwheel, yeah. But yeah, I mean, like it was all of that. The puppetry work was just a kind of a callback to a lot of that stuff. Like I know we talked about this as well, but you know, here we are some 30, 40 years later, and the art hasn't advanced that much. And I don't know that it needs to. Like I don't necessarily need it to be fluid. You know what I mean? Like I think we widely accept the choppiness or the imperfections of it all as being, you know, real. Like we see past that, you know, and I think we've been conditioned to see past that. Be interesting to see like what kids think of that, you know, like if that's something that I don't think they care either. You know what I mean? I just don't think they,
I don't think it matters to them. I think, I don't know if they know it's a puppet or not, but they don't care. Grogu's cute and it makes them laugh. That's what they care about. Yep.
Well, that's the, I wanted to start there just kind of with the behind the scenes thing, but why don't we move into, I guess, talking about maybe some of our favorite moments, first off from the movie. Actually, you know what, I'm going to switch it up on you. Cause I know in the show notes, this is what we want to talk about was next, but I want to actually, just skip over this and come back to it. I want to talk about like, what did we see in this movie that kind of reminded us of who these characters were from the television series, whether that's habits, you know, I don't know, personality traits, you know, even the way they think, that sort of thing, like for Mando and Grogu, because you gotta remember, like a lot of, you know, I was listening to the interview from Jon Favreau. I think he did it with, it might've been Discussing Film, if I'm not mistaken. He did some interview with him and Dave Filoni. And he made a good point that, you know, it's been 7 years. And so like a lot of the kids that saw The Mandalorian and Grogu that were 3, 4 years old, 5 years old, they don't even remember it. And that's very true. Like that, I mean, you don't retain so much memory from that era of time. And that this was a lot for a lot of people. They might have a faint memory of like who Grogu was, or maybe they liked him, but they hadn't seen the show in that long. And so they had a lot of new kids and all new folk coming into this, young and old, that hadn't seen Grogu in a while. And so it did take some time. Like they did spend some time to show you and remind you of who they were, establish them as characters without really getting into all the weeds of the history and what's past in the television series. So I guess what I want to do is maybe just kind of highlight some of the things that stood out to you where they were indicators of that and who they were before we got into just, you know, our favorite moments from the movie.
So for me, obviously it's his prowess when it comes to what he does physically, right? That's what we've seen from day one from this character. You know, he's a proficient hand-to-hand combatant. He is an expert in all types of weapons, not just blasters, but I mean, you know, he had that Beskar spear at one point. You know, he had the dark saber at one point. He has, you know, various knives that he'll throw, that he has hidden on his body, that he'll throw when he needs to. And then, like in this movie, he had 2 huge blades that he was proficient in. So that is something that I've seen throughout. Not just, you know, the first 3 seasons and this movie, where he is just a proficient combatant. He goes out and he knows how to fight, and he fights smartly because he's able to get out of jams that, you know, a normal person or even a normal Mandalorian would be stuck in, but he has the experience and the knowledge to get out of these jams. That's probably the first thing, is that, and I think that is something that will be constant with the Mandalorian until his story is over. The other thing that I think is still prevalent are his principles. Now, they're not exactly the same as what they were back in the TV series. Now, his principles are, you know, taking work that has, if you could say, a little bit more honor to it, not just, you know, taking jobs from whomever wants to hire him. You know, he makes the point in the movie, he goes, I don't work for warlords anymore, or crime lords or something like that. He essentially says he doesn't work for the bad guys anymore. Whereas, you know, when we first meet him, he works for who pays the most, right? It doesn't matter who they are. But those are his values. Obviously, they've changed, but he still is steadfast in keeping his values up. Also, even looking at when he was dehelmeted, and you saw the angst as well as the anger for being dehelmeted, because the Hutts were right. That does bring shame in his sect of Mandalorians. And that's something that's always been constant as well. We saw the same thing, like when he was in the Imperial disguise with the helmet and they made him take it off. Oh, yeah. The looks were very similar. But here there was a little bit more anger to it because they threatened Grogu.
Yeah.
So those are probably the two things for Din Djarin.
I think there's. Oh, go ahead. No, keep going.
No. I was gonna say for like Grogu, he is kind of. I like I said, I watched a couple of episodes the other night, and for me, yes, he coos and he does funny things. He wants to eat everything, and everything that's smaller than him, he considers a toy. Mm-hmm. But as far as like from a maturity level, and then keep in mind, he doesn't speak and he's a fictional character, but still, from a maturity level, it's night and day. At least in my opinion, it's night and day. While he's still probably technically, even or for Yoda species, even though he's 50 years old, he's still technically, I would put him at around like 4 years old, human age, maybe 3, because, he's not really speaking. But his maturity from, being in his pod the majority of the time, because, he is an infant and, he's not real proficient in walking, using the Force here and there, and then immediately going to sleep because it drains him. Now he's very competent in the Force abilities that he does have. He has the strength to keep up and not necessarily just, fall out every time he uses the Force. And, he understands, especially like when Din is poisoned and he has to take care of him, he knows exactly what to do, or he knows what he has to do, I should say, to keep him safe. And hopefully, like before he found the antidote, I should say, keep him safe in hopes of that he'll, wake up. So all of that, for me, Grogu is a little bit more difficult because watching those episodes from the TV show and then remembering what I saw from this movie, it's almost a completely different Grogu.
Yeah. For me. And I think that speaks to a lot of that speaks to the growth that we'll talk about here, I guess, more in just a second. So I definitely see all that. I mean, I think for me, Din they did a lot of things that were just kind of like member berries, right? Mm-hmm. To kind of get you up to speed on who he was and all that. You brought it up, and the way I would say it is weapons are his religion. He made use of a lot of weapons in that opening sequence. We saw him kind of gearing up and he got to use some new weapons. I mean, every moment, whether it's his hands or something he's physically using, he had a lot of bombs that were going off and explosives. Mm-hmm. And so that was all expected. It was a reintroduction of just how incredibly adept he is at fighting and combat and all of that stuff. Interesting that he didn't use his whistling birds, and I don't know what the story was behind that. It felt like there were moments in there where he probably could have used it. They could have been very convenient for him to use it. Maybe it was too convenient with plot armor or whatever, but we didn't get to see it necessarily used, which I thought was interesting that they wouldn't have done that, because I think that was, I don't know, I could be wrong, but I think that was season 1. When he got those and when he used them, it was a big deal. Like I remember everybody talking about like, wow, That's so cool. We've never seen anything like that. So we got that. He had a couple of his famous sayings that they brought over. He does say, this is the way. Mm-hmm. He says, I can bring you in warm or I can bring you in cold, or hot or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. He had, he got his Razor Crest back. Right. So just the visuals of him flying in that cockpit were back for this movie. He got his Ambin pulse rifle back, which, I don't know that I need to go look at. I've never actually gone and look at the Wikipedia entry on that. I thought that was something that was specific to them. Maybe not. Maybe it's just coincidence that there just happened to be one in that armor, in that ship.
Well, that the people that had that ship, they were gun runners, so weapons would be abound. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah. So they would have all kinds of stuff. Yeah. Yep. But yeah, it was cool that we got to see him with that and do some really heavy damage. I mean, we didn't see any technical disintegrations, nothing of anybody that was like a flesh that I remember. It was mostly droids just disappearing. And then he took that really big shot at one of the big droids that was trying to pry open the doors there at the very end. I mean, just blew like half of its head and neck right off there. So it was cool that we got to see him use that rifle. And there was a moments there when he was fighting the two big droids too, that he was using the like the stun part of it, you know, the little prongs and everything. So very reminiscent of some of the stuff that we saw him do during the first and second season. You know, there was the removal of the helmet, and, you know, you've already talked about all that, but just how important that was to him, and maybe not as important these days. To be determined. We'll talk more when we get to the questions here. I felt like for his character, you know, I don't know that he, you know, we don't know how much time has passed. I mean, we were talking about, did this movie take place before Ahsoka? Does it take place after Ahsoka? I think I'm still leaning that it takes place after, or maybe right around the same time, you know, in parallel.
Yeah, I would subscribe to that.
Yeah. And so I don't know that we've had a lot of time that passed between the end of season 3 and this. I mean, maybe 3 months, I would say, would be kind of like my minimal, maybe 6 months at the most. It feels like they just went right back into work. I don't know that it's been years that have passed. And so why I bring that up is because I don't expect in that short period of time for him to have grown a lot from the end of season 3 to this movie. You know, a lot of what we were seeing is a lot of what they were showing us were just things to get us caught up. And in the process of the movie, I felt like he did grow a little bit more, you know, as we'll get to here in just a second. And then as far as Grogu goes, you know, he had the use of the Force. As I was going through and I was creating these show notes and I was writing down my stuff, I was like, you know, there's a whole episode here. Like, there's a show that we can do where we just kind of chronicle the use of Force by Grogu and talk about his growth and his development, you know, the Luke factor, how much of that plays into what we saw during this movie, if anything, right? And that's what we'll do at some point. Like we mentioned at the very top of the show, we'll have that Grogu and his Force ability show come out a little bit later. But, you know, the fact that he did get to use the Force, which was great. You know, I think we had predicted that hopefully they would, you know, have him give him a lightsaber. I don't know if that was wishful thinking or just not wanting to break the streak of not having a lightsaber in a Star Wars movie. It wasn't necessarily a need for me. It was more of a want. I would have loved to have seen him even have it on his hilt, you know, even if he never used it. But, but the use of the Force was still there. You know, we got to see him still as a child most of the time. There was a lot of gooing and guying, you know, when he laughs and he still can't speak.
Right.
You know, he pushing buttons when he shouldn't be pushing buttons, doing stuff like that. That was all reminiscent again of season 1. Season 2, always hungry, always smiling, you know, just the lighter side of the Force, you know, if you will, no pun intended there, just really great. So, and then you can also see the potential in him too. Like there was always been great potential with him in the Force, and he's done some really remarkable things already that have been very unexpected to us as viewers. And I think they definitely carried that into this episode. I don't know that he did anything extraordinary. We'll talk about the growth here again in just a second, but I think they did a good job of, you know, again, making everybody fall in love with these characters again, be refamiliarized with who they are, and still set themselves apart in showing that they are growing, they are developing, and you know, we get new versions of them as we come out of this. So
right, exactly.
So on that note, why don't we go into the next one, and then we'll come back to our favorite moments. Maybe end on that. But what were some examples? I know, you know, before when we did the final hype show, you had said that one of the things that you were most interested in seeing is growth from these characters. You want to see Din grow. You want to see Grogu grow. And I think you want to see both. I mean, I think we both did. We want to see them grow together as a father and son, clan of two, right? Whatever it is. How did you feel about that? And then I guess what were some of the examples for each that you saw in that growth?
Well, obviously, if to lead it off, I saw a lot of growth in Grogu. I saw, you know, and it was kind of a situation where he had to grow, he had to evolve, he had to move forward, or else Din would be doomed, right? Not to mention the other Anzellan that the dog took with him. You know, he realized it was up to him. And that's what the maturity level comes in, where he's like, you know what, it's up to me now. And I thought that little montage where he was like Rambo, you know, tightening all his, you know, putting all his weapons on and tightening the shield with the sigil on there. That was kind of showing, hey, okay, now it's up to me. I have to do this, which, you know, keep in mind, like I said, he's 50 years old, but I would put him between 3 and 4 years old, you know, human age.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot. And, that's not something I was expecting. Now, from the previews and stuff, we kind of knew that Grogu was kind of going to do his own thing. But honestly, I didn't know it was going to be to the factor of what we saw. So for me, his growth was them showing us how mature he's become and how he is while he's still an infant and he still doesn't speak, he still coos and caws and laughs. And he still wants to squeeze the Anzellans. He has matured.
No squeezy.
No squeezy. Yeah. He has matured, and that is the growth that I saw, and I was very pleased with that.
Yeah, I think he as far on that part, like it was enough where it was still believable because he wasn't able to do it on his own.
No.
You know what I mean? He had to get help. He acknowledged he needed to get help. He had the Anzellans take him there. They flew him there. They were with him the entire time. They were in the tunnels and everything as they were trying to get to him. So it wasn't a huge jump where suddenly he, went and took on droids and an army and stuff. I mean, he did what he could, and they did what they could based on their size and what they had available to them. So that still made it very believable. It was still, all he did was really lay a bomb wave, and then Dad was mad, like, get away from that thing. It's going to blow up.
Dank Ferrick.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And that was really all it took, right? That was enough. Where he really grew, though, is in the segment afterwards where he's taking care of him, because that was him 100%. He now had to rely on himself, right? There was nobody else around. It was just him and Grogu, or him and Mando. He made that decision to stick around. I don't know that he knew that he would be in that kind of predicament, but he knew it didn't feel right to leave his dad or leave Din like that, even though he could have taken off and come back, and Din had told him to do that. That just wasn't the right thing to do, right? He wasn't going to abandon him in that sense. If you think about it from this regard, he's repaying the favor back from the first episode of season 1.
Exactly.
Din had an opportunity to walk away and just leave that baby alone and let it fend for itself, and he chose not to. And this was the inverse of that, him now making that same decision for his dad. So it was very believable in that sense. It wasn't like over the top where he was, going in and doing some really heroic things. He was definitely, there was heroism, but not, Luke Skywalker saving the galaxy.
Exactly. He was just doing what he needed to do to keep him safe.
Yeah.
And it was nice to see, him being proficient. You talk about what was real cute, when he was tapping on the back of Mando's helmet as the charges were starting to go off. I thought what was real cute is his little hands patting the mud when he was making that hut. You saw him, he started, and then, it cut to another scene where, it's actually the full hut, but his hands are still going. I thought that was a real cute scene too. Obviously we got a lot of laughs when he used the Force to try to push Din all the way in, but he didn't make it big enough, so he kept hitting his head on the tree.
Yeah,
that was cute. But overall, like I said, the growth that I saw in Grogu was his maturity, and I wasn't expecting like crazy growth. I just wanted them to move forward a little bit, and for me, Grogu actually took a huge leap forward in the growth of his character because, again, maturity. It just shows that. With training with Luke Skywalker and, going on adventures with the Mandalorian, he's not just sitting there. He's actually, taking heed to what he's learning and what he's seeing and putting those skills to use. And that is a sign of maturity.
I'll say this is a quick note. So this morning, I don't know, it must have been like 4 a.m. this morning. I was still awake.
Now
could not go to sleep. And I was still thinking about the Mandalorian and Grogu, which, could sound sad, or maybe you're smiling because that's the case. But I was at 4 a.m.
Just a fan.
Yeah,
we've all done that.
And I was sitting there thinking about Grogu specifically. And so what I started doing was mapping out his hero's journey. Like, did he follow the hero's journey? And maybe at some point we'll do this. I don't know. I was thinking about doing I was talking to actually one of our supporters on social media about this. And she was like, you should do a Substack or something like that. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But we have Patreon as well. So maybe I'll do it on Patreon and just kind of list out where I felt like he went through the hero's journey. And it's kind of cool. Like, it maps out pretty closely. I mean, some stuff's not exactly there, but a lot of it is. So I may do that. But he does kind of have his own little hero's journey, especially once we get to that point there where he's kind of working on his own and having to kind of fend for himself and take care of Mando the way he did. But as far as like the growth goes, for me, for where I was going to go with Mando, I didn't see a lot of growth. I wouldn't expect to see a lot of growth either. Like I said, if there's only been 6 months, 3 months, maybe even a year at most, that feels like too much time. But whatever that is, I don't know that he's grown that much in his relationship with Grogu. As a result of this movie, I think that is no longer the case, right? But up until this point, I think he was pretty much the same person. We saw him very overprotective of Grogu. Not we know Grogu can't speak, but he was making decisions for him almost as a parental adult and like, hey, I'm working out, looking out for you. What comes to mind is when Rod of the Hutt is asking him, can I feed him? And he's like, sure, fine,
Sure,
go ahead,
yeah.
whatever, and in some regards too, like there are moments in seasons one through three for sure. Maybe at the very beginning of this movie, he almost looks at Grogu as much as he looks at him as a child and maybe his son, air quotes. He also looks at him as like a pet, the way he talks about him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is still kind of weird.
It is weird. Yeah.
And I would like for him to kind of grow out of that a little bit. I get it right now because he is a baby and he's not like he's not, I wouldn't say, what's the word? I wouldn't say a paternal type parent, but it might have been like how he was brought up. You know what I mean? Like in the Mandalorian world, when he tells the kid heal, I don't know that I've ever said that to any kid, like, hey, heal, or, to a dog, I would do that. Right. Or an animal, but I wouldn't necessarily say that to a person, much less like my kid.
Yeah.
But just little things like that. Like I'd like to see him eventually grow past all of that. Maybe that comes when he's much older and he's speaking and, whatever. But there are moments where he still feels like he was kind of treating him like an animal versus, his son or another person.
Yeah. One of the complaints that I've heard is the way that he talks to him from time to time, where he tells him to heal, and essentially treats him like a pet. That has been, and that's not something we've seen before. I mean, we've seen him treating him like a pet, the Mandalorian treating Grogu like a pet, but never using words like sit and heal. So that was one of the complaints that I've heard about this movie. I guess for me, the Mandalorian growth, it wasn't tremendous, but I mentioned earlier that, his values have changed from when we first met him in that first episode of The Mandalorian, years ago. So that is a type of growth because now, again, he's looking to do more quote unquote honorable jobs, right? Not working for guys or people that have questionable morals or questionable ethics or could be involved in questionable things, trying to align himself with forces that are for good. That is when he was like, I don't work for warlords anymore, for crime lords anymore. That was a sense of growth for me. But for even larger extent, and this kind of what I was looking for specifically for The Mandalorian was him to realize that his time is finite. It's not forever. I don't think he acknowledged it. He knew that, Grogu's species lives hundreds of years, but I don't really think he acknowledged that there's going to be a time where I'm not going to be here.
Yeah.
And he just finally acknowledges that. And that was a line that we heard in the trailer. We didn't hear it in the movie, by the way, where he said that, he's going to outlive me by hundreds of years. I'm not going to always be around to protect him. That was actually cut from the movie. We heard it in the trailers. But
wait, who do you think he was talking to then? If that was not recorded because they've done that, they've recorded stuff just for trailers. If that wasn't the case, who do you think he would have been talking to?
Rada. I think he would be talking to Rada.
Yeah.
And that leads to something else that we'll talk about. But I think now he finally realizes that he is only here a finite time compared to the lifespan of what Grogu's going to live. If he lives to, like Yoda's age and passes due to, natural causes. So I think that in turn is growth. Once you realize that, you're not immortal, you're not invincible. He did get hurt pretty good. He was poisoned, and if it wasn't for Grogu saving him, he would be gone. I think he realizes that, my time with him is limited. And, does that allow him to, or forces him to spend more quality time, or try to get him ready to defend himself even sooner, by teaching him the ways of the Mandalorian? I don't know, but that was Din's growth for me, was that he acknowledged, first of all, again, his values have changed and he stays strong to his values. That is growth for me. And then also the realization that, he only has a limited amount of time with Grogu. That is also growth. So for me, what I was looking for, what I said in the final hype show, I would say that I was pretty satisfied with the levels of growth for both of those characters.
Yeah. Yeah. You bring up something that I have been thinking more about. Like, a lot can be said about whether or not anything came from this movie, right? Like in terms of like world building or things to look forward to down the road. And I think the more obvious one is Rod of the Hutt. The fact that Rod of the Hutt is now a part of the New Republic. He's going to live hundreds of years old. He himself is probably a teenager at most, based on, their lifespan and where he is right now. So he's going to be around for a very long time. And I think when you think about this movie, that's really kind of the big takeaway, is that he's around. He's going to be around for a long time. But the more I've thought about it, and just to kind of accentuate what you just mentioned, that line of him living long beyond Din, I think it's Filoni and Favreau's way of signaling what the course of the Mandalorian and Grogu is going to be. Like, I don't know that we're going to have the Mandalorian around for very much longer. And by very much longer, maybe 5-10 years tops. Like, I can't say, Pedro's getting older, and yes, he doesn't do anything but the voice, and you can always throw another body in the suit, right? But at some point, that character has to, Grogu is only going to grow a lot. He's going to grow from the passing of Mando, right? At some point, that's going to have to happen. That's what you want that to happen, where children leave the den, right? They leave the parents' whole house and they become their own people. That has to happen at some point. So I think what they've been doing is just trying to kind of signal that that's essentially what they were, one of the takeaways from movies, that's going to happen. And it's good for Din, because I think, he heard it from I'm sure he's thought about it, right?
Right.
Luke has told him enough about it. Ahsoka probably told him about it. He hears it from the Hutts and saying that, you're going to die. We had that one line in there, like you said, that was pulled out. So all of that's a big realization. But it was even more real when he had that moment of like, holy crap, I'm going to die. Like he knew he was poisoned. He knew he was hurt. He was stumbling the entire time. He was fighting through that whole sequence there. And when he fell down, it was just kind of like, this is it. This is where my story ends. And that's why he told Grogu, go, I'm right behind you. You know what I mean? Like, you've got to go. You cannot stay here because we're both going to die. Right. That was his sacrifice to let him live and fight another day. So I think him coming back from all that was like, whoa, I got a second chance here on life. But at the same time, the reality is the line of work that I'm in is not going to bode well for me being able to take care of him, regardless of my natural birth or natural lifespan. That's just, it's not even, I'm in danger all the time. And so I think you're right. I think it's going to expedite some things, maybe his training. We'll get into this. I don't want to say too much, because I have more thoughts on this when we get into a question that we have here, a little bit about where the story goes. But I think you're absolutely spot on that that's definitely some of the growth that we saw here with Din. For Grogu, as far as Grogu goes, everything that happened in that sequence of him taking care of him were the biggest moments. Like, everything prior to that was all Grogu from seasons 1 through 3, right? It was funny and he's making jokes and doing this stuff, but this is where stuff got real, and he had to fend for himself, and he had to figure out things for himself. In my head, him building that little hut is like a natural, like, inherent thing for his species. You know what I mean? Like, just like somebody used the analogy of like beavers. No one teaches a beaver how to make a dam, right? It's part of their genetics and DNA and, whatever, ancestry, whatever it is. It's just in their makeup, and they know how to instinctively go out and create a dam and chop down wood and build it, like birds too. No one teaches a bird how to make a nest, and yet they can go make nests. And for Grogu in this species of Yoda, that's how they do it. They know how to make a hut, instinctively. And maybe maybe Yoda's hut was like that too. He built his own hut,
Now I have to go back and watch Empire to see if that's the case.
I think if you look closely, you can see a little like paw prints.
Yeah.
Where he did that. But he had not only did he had to build shelter, he had to go get food. he had to tend to his wounds. He went and got his own water. I mean, he was basically in survival mode at that point. And some of that is instinct, but some of it I would like to, attribute to things that he's picked up from the Mandalorian, from Din, right? The lessons that he's learned, not necessarily stuff that happened on screen. It could have been off screen that it happened, but he picked up on some of those skills and was able to apply them and keep him alive. And then the biggest jump for him was confronting the, what was this, Gatory? Was that the name of the alligator?
Oh yeah. Gatory. Yep.
Gatory.
Or Gatori?
You can say Gatori. I was just going to say Gatory because it sounds like Gatorade, but either way, the swamp creature guy, him, that was a big turning point too, because he had not only was he stealing, right? Because he was trying to survive, but then when he gets caught and he has to confront him, right? Because the thing saved his life because he got swallowed by the frog. Having to sit there and confess that he was afraid. He said, "Are you afraid?" And he nodded, yes. He goes, "You should be, because this is a big deal, right? You're out here on Nal Hutta. You're surrounded by huts. You are an appetizer for a lot of creatures, that don't end in hut." And, it was a big moment for him to, I guess, just to go through all that and be confronted like he was. And then on top of that, you got, Embo coming, up there and then having to confront his fears about that had now been the second time that he had been confronted with that. So there was just a lot of growth for him. And I think, I know I don't want to go too long on the show because we've got so much stuff to talk about still, but I think when we look back or we look forward to what comes after this, I think things are going to change, right? I think the relationship, the dynamic of the relationship is going to change now. I think we're going to see Mando empower Grogu to do a lot more. And that all speaks to the growth that we see both of these characters go through during this movie.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's just the natural course of things. Again, after what Grogu and Mando have been through, with the events of this movie, and not to mention, and we might expand on this a little bit later in the show, but I think he is going to be more involved in the New Republic than he even believes at the end of this movie. So, they're obviously they're going to be in some dire situations based off what we know of what's happening around that time frame in the galaxy. So, I think once that's all understood, he realizes that, I have to get this kid ready because, I could be offed at any time based off what I do,
Yeah. Hazard pay.
Exactly.
Very, very high. Okay. All right. Let's move on to maybe the last point. I know we had a fourth question. I want to talk about where this, that's not. Let's just quickly, why don't you give me your so at some point we are going to do from a certain point of view, top 3 moments of the Mandalorian and Grogu, right? Spoiler alert. That's coming. We do that with everything. So probably in the next 2 weeks or so, maybe 3 weeks down the road, just depends. But that'll be a Patreon exclusive show. We'll bring Patreon members and talk about our top 3 moments and our honorable mention moments. But just quickly right now, so while it's still fresh in your mind, what were some of your favorite parts for both Din and Grogu? There's no limit here. Just whatever kind of jumps at you right now.
So one of my favorite parts from Din was actually the way that he went about, and this was this was a whole scene. The way that he went about taking care of that first Imperial warlord at the beginning of the movie, I thought from a situation of being a bounty hunter / assassin / just an overall, bad person, that I thought that was very clean. I thought all of the action sequences were done. I thought it made Din Djarin look unstoppable. And I think that's what they wanted to convey to the audience. So that was one of my favorite moments. My other favorite moment, and this is really, really simple, but when Grogu administers the antidote and then he falls asleep under his arm and then he wakes up the next morning and, the Mandalorian's gone and he kind of pops up from behind the brush and says, "Hey kiddo." He's like, and then he goes, the old protect the young, then the young protect the old. And this is the way. him acknowledging, and essentially, I think that's his way of saying, "Hey, thank you for taking care of me and nursing me back to health."
Yeah.
I thought that was something that touched me. So that's one of my favorite memories, or one of my favorite moments from the movie. And then finally was the one, and this is just a silly moment, but I really enjoyed it, where he's trying to convince everyone to jump after, the New Republics are coming down on their bombing run. It's like, we can jump. And Rada's like, oh, well, that moat's shallow. He's like, no, we'll make it. And then they have no choice, and they kind of like drags everyone down, and they all jump. I thought that was another funny moment, and a moment I enjoyed. Again, silly, really, we knew they were going to jump. We knew that, but I thought that particular scene, that particular moment, was a good one for me. So that's what sticks in my mind the most.
Yeah. I have a couple moments here. I have a lot of moments, but I won't go through all of them. I'll save them for the Fact Boy show. But I would agree, definitely that whole opening sequence, beginning to end. I mean, we talked about it a lot. Of course, we did a whole episode on that first 25 minutes. I thought that was just thrilling. Like, I don't even know how many other adjectives I can use to describe it, but it was thrilling. It was exciting. It was, like you said, Din looked absolutely unstoppable. He was a force. I mean, who would have thought, after Empire Strikes Back, that we would have a character that would be able to take on 3 of those at one point, at one time. And he did it different ways, of course, but those are kind of iconic. And even when you got to Legends, and you think about like a Dark Empire and the way Luke Skywalker was able to take one down, he used the Force to take it down. That was still impressive, but you got somebody who's taken down 3 of these things, right? Mm-hmm. Well, it's a big deal. So I love that. I think specifically, and I know hopefully this will make you mad. I actually really like that action sequence. I know you said you don't like it because it was kind of chaotic and sloppy, and he wasn't just, he wasn't taking care of people. He was having to come back. I just love that. I love that chaoticness mm-hmm. or chaos of that scene and everything that's going on. It's just, visually, it's cool to kind of watch, and you're like, oh, that guy's still, oh, nope, never mind. He's not. Oh, what about that? Oh, he got that guy too. Yeah. That was it was just neat. I think the payoff on that scene is when the doors finally close and we see the face of that commander.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, oh my God, what just happened? He just wiped out everybody.
Right.
That's the payoff for all of that. Right. And I think that's why I think I've always loved. I have to go back and watch the D23 footage, because I swear that look on his face was more comedic than it was. I've seen the movie now 3 times, by the way, as of this recording. And he doesn't look like he takes a deep breath, but if I remember correctly from the original footage, he's almost got like a, oh boy, kind of look on his face. Like, because I remember the audience laughing that were watching it in the stand on the film, illegal filming that was happening.
Exactly. It's kind of like, I can't believe this is happening. Kind of look.
Yeah. Whereas, and he has the same look here, but it's more of like a look of just dread. Like serious
exactly.
Dread.
Like, oh crap, Yeah. Well, again, back to that, the action and what the Mandalorian was doing in that scene was great. Again, it's a directional thing that annoyed me, because what's happening behind him is not necessarily in focus. Everything, because he's still moving forward but going back. So that's why I mentioned the hallway scenes from Darth Vader in Rogue One, and then Luke Skywalker in the season 2 of The Mandalorian, where he just keeps coming forward, but he's mowing down people as he's coming forward. For me, that's better direction versus what Favreau did in that scene. But it was still great. I still enjoy it. It's just a directional thing for me. And then I also mentioned when Batman goes to save Martha Kent in Batman versus Superman. I think that's the best example of an action sequence like that ever filmed. And he just kept coming forward and didn't really, he had people coming from the side and the front, but he took care of everyone that was behind him already as he moved forward. And I thought that was the greatest. And so it was just a little, I like to use the term Nerf pebble a lot, instead of throwing stones. That's the only issue I had with it, but it did knock it down for me in regards to the directing part of giving my review.
Paisley chimed in and said, yeah, that was badass.
Yeah, it's badass. It was. Yeah.
So I love that whole AT-AT sequence, AT-AT, depending on how old you are. And I love the Salt Cafe was fun. I wish that sequence would have been longer. Like I enjoyed it, but I think I have expectations, and I've mentioned already, because of another movie. So But otherwise, I thought it was a great scene. I loved all the action. I loved the way stuff was flying everywhere. The chaos again that was ensuing, with Mando just taking down, a ton of people at one time. And then I think when he left Grogu and the Anzellans, that was probably the best moment for me. Like, I know I loved all these other moments here, but that whole sequence, because remember they tee us up by you're going to die. He's going to live beyond you. Right. We're led to believe that even in the TV spots, they were already hinting that he wasn't going to make it out alive. Like this was going to be the end of the Mandalorian, and whether or not you believed it, totally different. But when we got to that scene, I didn't think he would die. Like I figured he would live. When he tells Grogu to take off and Grogu leaves and we cut to him running off, I thought he's not going to leave him. There's no way he would do that. It just didn't seem like that would. And if he did, then they would just circle around, or come in and help them or something, right? So I didn't think that was the end of it. But there was enough happening in that sequence that really was emotional for me, because he made that decision. He knew that. I think he was hopeful that he'd be able to make it out of it, but I think he was very likely. He knew that it was very likely this was his last mission. This was going to be his last fight, and whatever he needed to do to buy them time to get away safely, he was going to do that. And then, he'll go ahead and die whenever that's all over with. And so it was more about the music, the way those scenes were filmed, I thought was beautiful.
Yes.
At times the audio changes. You know what I mean? We hear more music and we hear a little bit more sound effects, but things are muted at the same time. You know what I mean? It was really, really, really surreal. It was almost like you were in his helmet, or you could feel him dying,
right?
And things weren't as loud anymore for him, right? It was just really cool the way they just filmed all that. And and then when he finally stops and kind of lays down, he kind of has this moment of like, okay, I did it and I can die now. And that's when he just kind of falls back and leaves it up to fate or whatever else at that point. So it was really great. I love that whole, at the very end too, the way he dies is just so lonely. Like he's just all by himself out there in the middle of, Nal Hutta of all places, like not a glorious way to go down, right? Or a glorious place to go down. But, maybe he's sitting there thinking about Grogu and all the battles that he's fought and everything he's been through up until that moment. It was pretty emotional. That was my favorite part of Din's journey on this one. Excuse me. For Grogu, I posted something on social media that went nuts, and it was the sequence from Commando where Arnold Schwarzenegger is getting ready to go to battle. I said that was it. That was Grogu getting ready to go to Nal Hutta. But I love that whole sequence, and the fact that they do. And if you've listened to the show or watched the show any length of time, you know that I am a big fan of montages, and especially like 80s type montages. And Favreau has done a lot of them in The Mandalorian. Like there's a ton of them if you think about it. But we got another one here of him doing that, gearing up. I loved anytime he jumped. I love the fact that he just kind of jumps and he lands and jumps and lands. I mean, it looks very puppetry, it doesn't look CG, and I'm totally okay with that. I think I mentioned it earlier. Every time I giggle every time he taps on the helmet and he looks behind him and he turns around, he taps on the helmet again. It's just the cutest little sequence. And then here's the one, a couple other things. You mentioned the force pushing of Din into the hut. That was great. The line of big pipe, huh? That one liner was in there, and they've got it now. I don't know if you've seen their most recent TV spots, but they're using that line, that sequence, that scene in there.
I saw it. They also have it as a little vignette on the Star Wars social media accounts.
Oh, really? Okay. So, it's a great little line. And for all the three audiences that I've been with, two of them were kind of subdued, and the first one was like really loud. But even the more subdued audiences, that got to chuckle a lot of people, right? They get it. It was good comedy. It felt like Star Wars comedy there.
Right.
But I think my favorite sequence from Grogu is the one sequence that I think I had the most problem with, and that's him taking care of Din. Like I thought him taking care of him when he was down, loved every bit of it, because he did all of that again on his own merits. It was all up to him. Did it make for the best use of time in the movie? In my opinion, no. That's where I have a problem with like some of it, where it just kind of came to a crawl. But I even said this too, like I feel very conflicted, because there's other times I've said I could take an hour of Grogu doing all of that stuff, or doing even more of that stuff, and I'd be happy with it. I just don't know that it fit in the right place, and maybe it went a little too long based on where the pacing of the movie and the inertia of the movie. but that's a me thing. It's not you. And if you loved it for the way it stands, totally cool with that. But that was the most important part for me. That was like the one that, I was watching that and just fascinated by not only the artistry of the puppetry and all that, but just that Grogu was finally doing something on his own. And that's why we got the title of the movie being The Mandalorian and Grogu. We got to see the Grogu and Grogu part when all that was going on. So, okay. Why don't we wrap this up, at least as the discussion goes, before we get into our questions? And maybe just kind of quick thoughts on, maybe we'll do another show on this too as well, but just kind of our thoughts about where this goes in the future. Do you want to see this as a TV series? Do you want to see it more? Well, I'll tell you what, hold on. Why don't we table this? Because we have a question that addresses this directly.
Yes.
I was that in there. So why don't we do that? So let's get into our questions now. Sure. And let me pull up the questions here. And why don't you take the first one? While you're reading it, I will grab the poster. So, all right. So go ahead.
So this is from Jay MacArthur. And the question is, do we know who voiced the old guy in the woods that helps Grogu? And did anyone else think it was Samuel L. Jackson? I thought for a split second it could have been him. I don't remember the guy's name who voiced him, but I know he's pretty prominent in sci-fi with voice acting, but he's also in Dune, in the new Dune movie.
Yeah, it's Stephen McKinley Henderson is the actor. Yeah. I think it was in the last episode, we did one of the questions and someone said, wouldn't it have been cool if Matthew McConaughey had done the voice? I think they're both good. It would have been cool to get Sam Jackson back in Star Wars again, doing a voice. Andy Serkis has done too. Why not have him do too?
Allegedly, he's been dying to try to get back into Star Wars. So,
I know he has. He's been bringing up the Mace Windu's not dead.
Exactly. Exactly.
But that was him. So thank you, Jay, for your question there. Next question is from Adam Jung. Says, do you think when or if we get Mando season 4, will it be a prequel, a sequel to the events of the movies? Is this the right question? Hold on. That sounds like the one we had last week. I think I may have copied and pasted the wrong one for.
That's what I have in the notes.
For Adam. Yep. Yeah, I think that's the right one. Maybe we answered this one already.
Maybe we did. I'll go ahead and just take a stab at it. Yeah. I think at this point, the way that particular point in time in the galaxy, it has to be a sequel. I don't think we could actually go back and do anything right now. I think if we went back and did a prequel, like, Din's early years as a foundling, or, we kind of got a glimpse of Grogu's early years out at the Jedi Temple, and then he was rescued by Kelleran Beck, Jedi Master Kelleran Beck, played by Ahmed Best. Mm-hmm. I don't think the fans would be down for that. I think it's something that they probably want to know, but everyone's itching at the bit for Grand Admiral Thrawn and what he's going to do to the galaxy at this time period. So I think if anything, it will have to be a sequel to the movie, moving forward.
Yeah, I concur. I think it's going to be a sequel. I think there's a story to be told for prequels, mm-hmm. For whether that's Mando or maybe how Grogu was captured and, where he was found and, all that. I mean, we've got glimpses of that, like you said, from Kelleran Beck, but what happened after that, we don't know. That would be something to be interesting, but I don't know that we would ever see that on screen. It seems like it'd be reserved for like a comic book or a novel of some sort. That's usually where they bury that stuff. Mm-hmm. So thank you, Adam, for that question. And then you got Paisley next here.
Yep. Paisley asks, do you think the way changes and evolves for Din as his character grows and he becomes a father figure to Grogu? Do you think his relationship with Grogu changes his relationship with the Way? Now, if I was going to say all things were equal, I would say no, because if we look back at season 3 of The Mandalorian, I don't remember the big Mandalorian's name, but remember his son was captured by a monster, and Din actually saves the kid from this monster. And his son is actually practicing the Way. He has his helmet on. He can't take it off. That's how he lives. So if that was his mindset at that time and all things were equal, then I think no. I think he adjusts the way he parents and is the father figure to Grogu based on the Way. Now, that being said, I believe right now the Mandalorians and their rules are in flux, especially with, them just coming together, at least two sects coming together, retaking Mandalore. Half of them believe in the way, don't take your helmet off, and the other half believe that the other half are zealots for believing that, but they're united. At least initially, they're united. I think that the way is in flux. Not to mention also the armorer said, you guys got to go on your own journey, and train Grogu in the ways of the Mandalorians, which that could be interpreted several ways. So I guess for me, after saying all that, it comes up to a big I don't know, because it depends on what's going on. We didn't touch on any of the other Mandalorians that are on Mandalorians that are on Mandalore. And, we don't know the status of, what rules they're following. So really, I don't know. What I do think is that if we get to that point, I think his relationship with Grogu, especially if it's going down the path that I think it's going to be going down. Again, he knows now he has limited time with him. He acknowledges that, I should say. I think the way is not something that's going to be a priority for him. It's going to be whatever it takes to get Grogu ready, to take care of him, to rescue him if need be. I think that's going to take precedence over the way. But at this point, that's only what I think. I am not sure at all.
Okay. Oh boy.
Yeah, this is a lot. I mean, it's a good question, Paisley.
Well, she starts off by saying, I hope this isn't getting too deep.
It's
and
deep.
It is.
It's a deep question. Yeah.
I don't mind. I don't mind at all. I just want to make sure that I'm not long-winded here. So where I'll start is I talked a lot about this during season 3 of The Mandalorian. And specifically, it was on when we broke down the final episode, and we may have done like some Patreon episodes of like what's next kind of thing, looking forward with all of these characters. And that was inclusive of Bo-Katan, Paz Vizsla, who is the Vizsla you were talking about, who has a son that was played by none other than Jon Favreau. At least in season 1, he was. I did a lot of talk about this, and I think the way I would kind of give you the 30-second elevator speech about it is, I want to see the way change. I wanted to see the idea of, you've got the old ways, which is the armorer and the sect that Mando grew up in, and you've got kind of the more modern progressive way of, Bo-Katan and her group there. I wanted to have the Mando be the person that kind of brings the two together. And this goes back to hold on. It goes back to like season 2, I think, where I was talking about this. By the time we got to season 3 and Bo-Katan takes up the Darksaber, if you will, or she takes the mantle now of kind of being that person that's going to essentially reunite Mandalore, because they're fragmented. They're all over the galaxy. Mm-hmm. Concordia is a hot mess. It's been burned. They've scorched that thing to what, they turned it into glass, as they say on Mandalore as well. Concordia is not bad, but Mandalore itself has been scorched to glass by the Empire. So in my head, I think it is Bo-Katan who is going to unify all the Mandalorian clans, and I think they're going to need that. Like, if I really want to, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but when we talk about like, who's going to go against the Empire, because they have a pretty big fleet if they can just get their crap together. Could it be the New Republic? Maybe not right now, because they're still, hurting themselves. I mean, they sent everything out to Endor, nearly everything out to Endor. So they're still rebuilding. But if they could pull all the Mandalorians together, that could be a force that fights up against Thrawn. Mm-hmm. And so where I was going with this is, at some point, I feel like there is going to need to be a character who reunites everybody and says it's no longer about the old ways and the new ways. We need to come together, and this is now the new way, if you will. It's more of a hybrid kind of thing. I wanted that to be Din. I think he'll probably fall in line with Bo-Katan. I see Bo-Katan being that person. I think Mando has done enough to kind of convince her that there's not necessarily anything wrong or inherently bad about the old ways. And there are certain good things that are very honorable and that could be incorporated into, how she rebuilds Mandalore, while at the same time still acknowledging that, hey, the new way is okay as well. I think that's probably enough for somebody like Din and the Armor and Paz and that whole group, I think they'll get on board and eventually change. So it's a long-winded way of saying that, yes, I do think it will change. He may not be the catalyst for that change. I think that's probably going to have to be Bo-Katan who does it. And I don't know that his relationship, the second part of this question is, do you think his relationship with Grogu changes the relationship with the Way? I don't know his relationship necessarily changes any of that. We'll have to see. There may be times where things don't, if they come up with new rules or whatever, they may not work because Grogu is, 2 feet tall and he's a kid. And so he feels like, hey, this doesn't really apply to him and I've got to change or I'm gonna have to go against it kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That might be a situation that pops up where he doesn't apply. And so he has to kind of take his own opinion of it. But I think it all depends on where they want to go with the character. If they want the character to be solo, it's a, lone wolf and cub. They're out there just making their way in the galaxy as father and son. Then yes, that's very possible that their relationship could change. If he falls in line and eventually gets in line with everybody on Mandalore and comes together, then I think he's just going to have to fall in line with everybody and what they're doing.
Exactly. I would agree with that.
All right. Sorry. I know that was probably way more than I needed to talk, but okay. Good question. Thank you. And we'll go to Maddie next. So Maddie, how do low sales and opening weekend, but lower budget, weak professional reviews, strong audience reviews, likely bode for the future of Star Wars media? How should we interpret the early results in terms of studio economics, etc.? Oh boy, we talk about this a lot on the show. I think the short answer is we don't know. Right. And I hate to say that because we don't know. And I mean, there's certain things that happen and we can kind of point to it. Where you're going to get the most information and whether you choose to believe it or not is up to you. But where you're going to get the most information about this stuff is in the investor calls. Right. Mm-hmm. We listen on the investor calls, and in those investor calls, they say, oh, we made this amount of money and this movie lost this much. We attributed to this. And, as a net gain, we were able to offset the money for here and that. I mean, it's just so complicated. You got to understand, this isn't like Lucasfilm putting out a movie and everything is based on this. There are so many other things that balance into whether or not a movie is successful from their eyes, their perspectives. And a lot of that we're just not privy to unless it comes up like in the investor calls or unless you're a shareholder who's privy to that type of information, right? So that said, I think when you look at it from just kind of a general agnostic view, if a movie has a lower budget and doesn't do as well, I think that bodes. I think that we typically would call that success because it's Star Wars. I don't think it gets that same kind of favorable look. You know what I mean? The scrutiny is so much higher because it is Star Wars and because the expectations are so much higher because of all of the sequels and the prequels and, Disney coming in and having a rocky start and all that stuff. That's all played into it. And it kind of poisons a lot of, the way we can, truly neutrally look at some of the success and failures of how these movies do. I think strong reviews are great because for me, and I said this when we did the final hype, if word of mouth is good because of strong reviews, it has longevity, right? The movie is going to continue to pull money in every week. We're not going to see we're going to see a drop. And there's no doubt the second week, it's always going to happen, right? But it's that second and that third week, and are people still going in and seeing the movie? And you can't rely on the critic reviews to do that because they're not that favorable. But you can rely on audience reviews, and you can rely on somebody telling you, hey, I went and saw it. My kids loved it. I thought it was great. You should go check it out. Mm-hmm. That's going to bode well for it. And so that may, it's still not going to shoot up to the $1 billion mark worldwide, but it's going to be enough to kind of stay in theaters for, 4, 5, 6 weeks. And I think that will be looked at as a success as well. Mm-hmm. But again, as far as the question about economics and all that, I don't even pretend to understand a lot of that stuff. And I'll say this, my last thing on this, and I'll turn it over to you. I said this to Chris, and I think we may have talked about it on the last show or maybe on one of the shows here, but this movie was safe and I don't mean safe in like you've heard about recently about, it's a safe movie because it's just a TV show. I'm not talking about that. It was a safe investment because if you think about it, you have a movie that came up while Kathleen Kennedy was still president, and her name's on there. She's the executive producer. And so when they put this movie out, they can kind of play two ways. They can say, if the movie does really well, they can say, okay, well, it was a great success and Kathleen Kennedy's name on it. And we've got even better things coming now that we've got Dave Filoni and Brennan in the driver's seat, right? But if it fails, the same thing applies. They can safely go and say, well, yeah, okay, maybe it didn't do as well as we wanted it to do, but you have to remember that Kathleen Kennedy was on her way out. You know, she's no longer part of Disney or Lucasfilm as the president. She's still producing, right? But she's no longer the president. And now, I mean, even though this movie didn't do that well, we've got Dave Filoni in the seat and we have Brennan in the seat. And from here on out, things are going to be great. So when you're an investor, you can kind of play both sides, or you can say that to the investors on both, you know, in both scenarios and get away with it. And so I feel like that was a safe investment. It was a safe move for them to do that from just a purely financial and strategic kind of standpoint.
Right.
Again, a lot said there, but go on.
No, and I think this particular part of Star Wars has been, there were some concerns and some negative feedback to season 3, but overall, these two characters have been very widely received and loved by Star Wars fans. So that's also another safe point to come through and make this movie. Now, I'm not going to speak for the back end executive financial, because I don't know anything about that, right? I don't know what Disney and Lucasfilm execs need this movie to do in order to be considered a success. I'm just going to go by what I've seen other movies do and what other movies that have been considered a success. I'm going to use that criteria to try to, you know, give my opinion on this particular movie. Yeah. And I've always said, I believe that this movie needs to be a success. It doesn't need to be The Force Awakens, but it does need to be a success. It does need to come out in the black, meaning money was made, money was not lost. I think that it has to be that, for the one reason, to help or to allow the fans to keep having faith in Dave Filoni, because I kind of disagree with what you were saying, Albert, earlier about how people still align with that this movie was essentially a Kathleen Kennedy movie, because the origins of this movie came about when she was still president of Lucasfilm. That is true. That is 100% true. But I think most fans will see this movie as the first movie of the Filoni era, with him being co-president along with Lin-Manuel Brennan. It doesn't matter that this was created, you know, last year, or the seeds of this was planted maybe even before last year, while Kathleen Kennedy was still in charge. They're going to see he's in charge now. They are in charge now. Him and Lin-Manuel Brennan, they're in charge. This movie is released under their watch. I believe fans will say this is Filoni's responsibility, especially since they're Filoni's characters, right? So I believe that this movie needs to be a success, so that way the psyche of Star Wars fans, and I use that word a lot in talking about this, but that's really the best one I can use to describe what I'm talking about, so that they can kind of feel at ease and be like, yes, this is what we were expecting, and we like this movie. And so far, from, I would say, probably 90% of the fans, they love the movie, so that's always a good start. But I think that this needs to be a feather in the hat for Filoni and Brennan. And that way the fans will have more faith in what's coming out in the future with Starfighter and everything that comes out after that. So I do believe it needs to be a success. Now, if we look at the numbers from the opening weekend, they actually did better stateside and international than they thought. And I read some publications where they're like, a lot of it has to do with what Albert said previously, that word of mouth is like, hey, this is a good family movie. You could take your kids to see it. They'll enjoy it. You'll enjoy it. That I've heard that word of mouth, not just in the realm of, you know, Star Wars fans, but like in, you know, I work remotely and I'm in Slack and Teams chats all day, and they're talking about the movie there. Right. Yeah. So the word of mouth is getting around, and I think that bodes well for this movie. And not to mention that now, again, it made more money than they thought it would. If we look at just the cost of the movie itself, and I understand that there's more costs overall that, you know, Disney and Lucasfilm need to cover to be in that area of making money. for this movie. But the initial production cost has already been recouped because the production cost was $165 million, and I think total they pulled in like 175 worldwide. So it's on a good trajectory. And I think it does have strong word of mouth. I do believe that this movie, again, it doesn't have to be an uber success. It just has to be successful. It has to make money. That's what I think the investors would want, is that this movie made money. This movie had good word of mouth and the fans enjoyed this movie. I think we're on the road to have all those three things met. And I do think when it's all said and done, The Mandalorian and Grogu will be considered a successful movie. That is a feather in Filoni and Brennan's cap. Now the sky's the limit for Starfighter.
Yeah. The expectations for Starfighter are like crazy. At some point, we'll have to talk about that now. But
definitely.
Cool. All right. Let's see. I think you have the next one here from Lucid Truth.
Lucid Truth, a Patreon member. What do you think the next challenge Grogu and Din's... Oh, I'm sorry. Let me start over. What do you think the next challenge Grogu and Din's relationship needs to face for another compelling story? That's a good one. I think it might be a little bit of what we discussed here. If I had my choice, obviously an adventure where, they're high stakes, obviously the New Republic and him now being one of them unofficially, that has to, it has to be a compelling adventure. But I think we talked about, the way and how that's going to affect, the relationship moving forward with, or how it could affect the relationship of Din and Grogu moving forward. I think that kind of challenges, because that challenge between the two of them, I'm like, okay, is this right or is that right? Because we know Grogu understands what Din's about in regards to the way, but remember, he also had some training with Luke on the Jedi. And while a lot of their beliefs are similar, a lot of them are radically different. So I think what I would like to see is not uber conflict like, you see in like teen movies where, they just can't stand their dad or their mom or whatever. That's not what I want, but maybe some conflict in between themselves to help them grow even further. I think that's what I would like to see in a story regarding their relationship moving forward.
Yeah, I do too. I think they might have set the stage here for, the old protecting the young protect the old. That's probably going to be a theme that we see going forward. And from that, I think we'll see some challenges that come out of it. I don't know that they have a lot of personal challenges. I mean, I think most of the personal challenges that I could see are kind of age-based or time-based now. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like Grogu still can't completely take care of himself. Like that was clear, at least from this movie. And maybe it was clear to you that it was not the case, but for me it was. And I think that's just going to come with time. Like time has to pass. He's got to get older. He's got to get more agile. He's got to be able to speak. I mean, there's just some basic things that he needs to do. And that's not going to happen in the course of, a couple weeks or a couple months or even just a couple of years based on his current age. Mm-hmm. So I think that's got to advance. Whether or not Mando lives beyond that, lives to see it, is a whole nother discussion.
Right.
Question. So I don't know that they have anything personally. I think for them, together, I think for them, it's going to be working together towards a larger cause. And I say that probably selfishly because I do think that now that we got this little side mission out of the way, right? They were able to grow and he trusts Grogu now. Grogu feels more confident about himself, et cetera, et cetera. Now that puts him in a better position to take on a much larger threat like a Thrawn or the rebuilding of Mandalore. And I think some of the challenges that we see from them are going to come from them working together now in this new world, this new kind of relationship, this new partnership that they have. And that's only going to happen if we get a movie or we get the Filoni-verse explode that, feels like it's imminent now with Filoni, especially he's right now. He's talking about it and he's talking about how everything is proceeding as he planned or as he's foreseen as his exact quote. So I think that is coming up, but that's where I would see the conflict in the relationship growing is in a larger at large kind of, warfare or what's the word? Theater, I guess is what I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. Okay, but cool. Thank you for that question, Lucid Truth. One versus CPU says, when the series comes back, is it still called The Mandalorian or is it called The Mandalorian and Grogu? I think it's The Mandalorian and Grogu. Like, it feels like that would be kind of a no brainer now for me. If they went back to The Mandalorian, then,
yeah,
it's like putting toothpaste back in the bottle.
And I want them to do the title card like they did for the movie, where it's The Mandalorian, and then they take a couple beats and then
and slap it down.
Yep, and right, Grogu. Yeah. That's what they need to do. No, I agree. I think if it does come back as a series, it will be The Mandalorian and Grogu.
Yep. Okay, next one.
All right, Boonta Steve. Do you think Grogu will ever try and develop his Force abilities again later in the future, or will he just stay with the powers that he knows from here on out? I would think that as someone who has received some training from the classic ways in the Jedi Temple to a more Boken style, to use a term from Ahsoka and Baylan Skoll, from Luke Skywalker, I would think that him still being in tune with the Force, that he would develop his current abilities in the Force would become stronger, but he would develop others just naturally being in tune with the Force. That's what I think.
Oh boy. I mean, so yeah, this gets into the future of where these characters go. Mm-hmm. I would like personally for him to go get more training at some point. Like, I feel like he may get to a point where, he feels like, okay, I've got my Mandalorian stuff behind me, but there was that one dude who's now long dead, and he trained me on a few things, but I really want to get in contact or get more in touch with that part of me as well. Mm-hmm. Because in my head, he is going to be like the perfect fighter, warrior, whatever you want to call him, because he's got the Mandalorian background, but he's Force sensitive. Like, that is just, we've seen it before in Legends, and it's a, no pun intended, force to be reckoned with. So I love that idea for him. I loved him growing up into being just that super badass, right? Bringing those two worlds together. But he would need more training. And I think the question comes down to, I think he rolls with what he's got right now, and he just kind of uses it. He's going to be using the same stuff. He's going to be, he's got Force healing. Don't get me wrong. That's a massive power already. Mm-hmm. He's got Force healing. He's got, Force crush. He can do, he can levitate, mm-hmm. right? Some of the basic stuff.
He can mind control animals.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Maybe as he begins to speak, he can start to, the Jedi mind trick stuff, mm-hmm. and all that. But he would need more training. And the question is going to be is like, when does he want to go seek that training out? Because Luke will probably be gone by that point. And if he isn't, then that's really cool, because then he gets a lot more training. But I'm thinking it's going to be much later. And so that puts him in a situation where he's relying on, Rey's Academy or some new group of Jedi Order that's now come up, people that we're not even aware of, right? Maybe their dogma has changed and the way they teach has changed, and some of the powers that they learn are new and expanded upon, all that. So I think if he rolls with what he's got now, at some point when he wants to get in contact with all that again, or rekindle all of that, he will. What he learns from that, I think, is just depending upon how old he is at the time and what kind of resources are available to him from the Jedi Order.
Right.
Cool. All right. You got Utini.
Utini, a.k.a. Dante, our Patreon member. Do we think Din will ever leave his sect? Will we see him voluntarily show his face to friendlies again? I don't think we'll see him leave the sect. I'm open to the possibility that he would come in conflict with the sect, especially now being around other Mandalorians that are not part of his sect, Mandalorians, I should say, that are not part of his sect, and see how they still are overwhelmingly Mandalorians, but just not practicing exactly the way that his sect is. I think that there will be some conflict. I do not see him leaving the sect, though. And will we ever see him voluntarily take his helmet off again? That all depends on, I think, where he sees the way is going to go. If he sees that the sect, that the way it is now, and his sect is really not evolving to what the other sect is doing, I think he's still of the mindset that no, his helmet stays on 100% of the time. But that could change, again, I do think what is going to be a motivating factor for him, and it will probably be a plot point in a lot of the other stories that we get from these two, is that he now understands his time with Grogu is finite. So he will do what he needs to do to ensure that Grogu is currently protected, and he can get him ready to try to fend for himself as best as possible when he is gone. And I think that's going to be the priority over any belief, any sect, the way, or anything like that. I think that is what's going to take precedence if it came between, what he needs to do for Grogu and the way.
Yeah. I don't think he'll ever leave, but I do, again, this goes back to what I said earlier, so I don't want to rehash too much here, but I feel like they will kind of eventually just merge and become some new group of Mandalorians, right? More half progressive, half, conservative, if you want to call it that. So I think that'll happen. So does he leave? No, not per se, but what he becomes a part of is something completely new and a hybrid of both. That's still my prediction. It's been my prediction since season 1, I think, or maybe even season 2 of The Mandalorian. Will we ever see him take his helmet off? I think if that's the case, then I think he becomes comfortable with that, and maybe it becomes optional. Like, hey, if you don't feel comfortable taking your helmet off, you don't have to. No one's going to shun you for that because we're all Mandalorians. But if you want to take it off, you can. I think for him, it probably makes sense just because it's Pedro Pascal. And if they were going to show him, then that's an opportunity for, say, to show his face and say that, he just feels comfortable doing it. I think people we might see a scenario where he's more comfortable taking it off in front of certain people rather than others. Maybe Bo-Katan, if that's one-on-one, they're in the palace, he takes it off. If he's, coming home to Amara after a long day, hard day of work, he takes it off, right? I'm kidding. I had to work Amara in there somewhere.
I know you were wanting to see that badly.
It didn't happen. But so yeah, I can see where he gets more comfortable around people. But yes, I would say those days of keeping the helmet on are probably gone. Whether or not that's a good thing or bad thing, I haven't really thought about. I like to see him without the helmet. I like the way Bo-Katan and her group works. That feels more agile and progressive, I guess. Like, I keep using that word, but that's the best word I can use to describe it. So I like that more than the dogmatic, conservative way of things. And you would need to explain to me and maybe him as a character of what does it change? You know?
Exactly.
Like, what difference does it really make?
Right.
If we're both effective and we're all Mandalorians, why do we have this? It just feels like it's a barrier that's constantly getting in the way. And God knows the Mandalorians have killed each other so many times over thousands and thousands of years. They're always at war. They're always fighting. And it's about time that somebody does reunite them again. And let's leave that up to Bo-Katan.
I agree.
Okay. That's the last question. So thank you for all your questions. And don't forget, if you guys want to throw a question in for the show that we've got coming in at the end of next week, please do so whenever you can. And we'll get you entered in for the next poster. Chris and I asked Siri for a random number between 1 and 8 before we came onto the air. And the winner is One Up versus CPU. So One Up versus CPU, this is your poster here. I'll reach out to you, get your address, throw it in one of the flyer or the mailers and the 2 mailers, and we'll get that out to you. And so congratulations to you. And thank you again to everybody who submitted questions. This is, like I said, my favorite part of this. I love answering these questions and really making me think about stuff that I don't normally think about because, there's so much other stuff going on. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Congratulations, One Up versus CPU.
Yep. Okay. I'm Alex. We're over on time. We're not getting to that question. I'll save that question for next week. Alex got a question up here that we'll get to on the next episode. So,
we'll get you next time, Alex.
Yeah. Okay, so don't forget, recapping Sunday night, we've got our Factpoi top 3 moments from Maul Shadowlord. If you're a Patreon member of any level, please reach out to me and let me know if you want to come on and do that show with us. We usually have about 3 or 4 people. It can be more. That's totally fine, but we're going to do our top 3 moments. We'll do our number 3, our number 2. We'll have some honorable mentions, and then we'll do our top moments, just roundtable. It's a really fun discussion. That's a Patreon exclusive, but please reach out to me if you want to be a part of that. June 2nd, which is next Tuesday, we'll have another Patreon show. That'll be coming back to Shadow of Maul. That's issue number 3 of the comic. More stuff going on there on Janix and or God, I already forgot his name. The police officer.
Brandon Lawson.
Brandon Lawson. Good Lord. But yeah, Lawson's character, we get to see more about what's going on there. So it's been a great series. I've enjoyed it. And so hopefully you guys have enjoyed the breakdowns. We've already done issue number 1 and 2, but this will be part 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then our next public show, which we're again asking questions for, that'll be Sunday, June 7th. And that's going to be Grogu and the Force. And so we'll look back at Grogu's Force abilities and how they've grown over the course of the first 3 seasons of The Mandalorian. We'll take a look at what it looks like in the in the Mandalorian Grogu movie and some of the things that he did there. And then we'll kind of force project, no pun intended, where we feel like this could go with him. And we'll be talking a lot about Luke Skywalker, Rey Skywalker, and everybody else that could be available for him to get some additional training. So looking forward to that show. That'll be a public show again on June 7th. Chris, I know we're over on time, but any final thoughts, words, or anything else before we get out of here?
No, I just want to say that the growth of these 2 characters are exactly what I was looking for. And I was satisfied with that. And for me, that just made this movie even better. So again, it's a great movie. If you have an opportunity to see it again and you really want to do it, go check it out and let's help this movie be a success. But for me, it's a success already.
Yeah, and I would agree. Like it was everything I loved about these characters was definitely on display in this movie, and then some. I felt like they did grow, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here. Like there's such a huge unknown, but it's very exciting, and I suspect we'll get a better understanding and clear direction. Maybe not clear, but some direction by no later than next year at Star Wars Celebration on where we can expect these characters to go, as well as all the other characters that we love in the Star Wars galaxy. So
absolutely.
All right. Yeah, we'll leave it there. Again, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. You got some shout outs for folks
Yes.
who joined us on the live stream.
I want to thank everyone who joined us on the live stream. Paisley, Alex, One Up versus CPU, and Qui-Gon J. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you guys. Hopefully we'll see you here on the next episode. Until then, on behalf of myself and Chris, thanks for joining, and we'll see you guys then.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.